Great. So welcome everyone to like how to make amazing visuals and working with clients. Hopefully this will give you some ideas for the applications that you'll be sending into the Gaelic Fund. I am so excited to have Sam and Antoine here, who are both amazing filmmakers in their own right and work together and will give us some insights about working with clients and making documentaries and amazing visuals. So welcome Sam and Antoine. Hi.
Hi there, how you doing?
Good. So can you guys tell us a little bit about who you are first and what you do?
Do you want to go first, Anton?
Yeah, sure. Since you're asking. Um, yeah, geez, I've been filming or like making videos and docs and stuff for like professionally for the last 5 years. Um, yeah, big like from the beginning, I've been keen to get involved in like the action sports world, but also like I've always been drawn to the things that make me emotional in film, like that feeling that you get when you watch something really powerful that that you think about for a few days afterwards or whatever. It's like in the past that's had a huge impact on me, and I thought like that was really something that I wanted to harness, and especially coming out of school, that was a I was like really optimistic about the ways that I could change the world and stuff. And also I wanted to be creative, so I found filmmaking somehow, and yeah, just went on from there, shot a bunch of stuff, and eventually wound up meeting Sam, and now we're working together.
Amazing. Thanks, Antoine.
Yeah, so I just saw Axel jumped on. I've been working with Axel on another project, so nice to see you, Axel. But yeah, I actually originally used to be an engineer, and that's what I studied in university. So it's quite a transition to become a filmmaker and photographer. I was studying engineering at university, but I was always interested in photography, and it's something I did on the side, just to like document my life and trips and things like that, and the sports that I loved and the places that I'd like to travel. So yeah, I was working with cameras, and then I started to pick up some clients to do some photography work. And then I started looking at moving towards photography full time and leaving my engineering job. So I worked part time as an engineer and part time as a photographer for a couple of years. And then maybe 2 years ago now, or 2.5 years ago now, I just moved full time to photography and filmmaking. I was working on a bunch of photography projects, some with clients, some documentary projects, and the same as Antoine, I really liked meeting like people, and I guess quote unquote what you could say is like your average day people. And I always found that they had like an amazing story. I always found like if you gave someone the space to tell their story, there was always something really cool and unique. And I was finding that through a lot of photography projects I was doing. And then I was kind of like feeling a little bit restricted, and I thought it'd be nice to be able to properly film some of these projects. And I met Antoine and saw his work and just thought it was amazing, and just thought like this is someone I could learn a lot from and work with really well. So we started working together on a big documentary that grew arms and legs, and we're still working on it 3 years later, and it's new it's getting there, but it's nearly done. So yeah, that's kind of my story.
That's awesome. You both create such incredible visuals. It's like the one thing about your work that I think that is so deeply powerful. And both of you are so visual. Can you tell me a little, and some of them are like really extreme, for folks, it might be nice to leave some links if you have like images or trailers about your work, but like you are going to some really remote places in Scotland and looking at incredible ski stuff. You guys have gone to surfing and you've done like such interesting water shots. I mean, they're really emotionally engaging. So for both of you, can you talk a little bit about that? Like, let's start at the very basic about creating a visually compelling image. Tell me a little bit about how you approach that. Is it instinctual? Is it conscious? How do you do it?
Yeah, I think for me, like I originally just started out photographing and filming the stuff that I really love to film. And I think that almost makes it easy in a way because you're 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 already interested in it, and you can already see the beauty in it, and you probably already have like quite a unique view on it. I started with surfing, and I love just being able to get into the environment that the surfers are in. So I got a water housing, and I think that in itself like almost just creates a good photograph. If you can get in amongst the environment, it creates like a sort of unique angle. And I think honestly by chance I kind of started creating those nice images just by putting myself in those situations. And then I think further down the line you get more interested in it and you start to study and look at it. And more and more I've been filming with Antoine, I've been starting to understand like more about light and like how you should be positioning your shots due to the light, if you want it backlit, if you want it to look more like cinematic, like how you'd set that up. So yeah, I think in short, probably just being really interested in the subjects that we were photographing and wanting to go to those kind of unique places that other people don't go. I think that kind of creates a shot in itself. And obviously, you have to have the technical stuff down, but um, yeah, you see a lot of people go to similar places, and I think it was quite a trend on like Instagram and stuff for a while. People would photograph the same places over and over again. But I think you can get really cool shots if you go to somewhere that people haven't seen before.
Cool.
Yeah, that's my thought. Antoine's probably got a lot more technical.
Because it is a documentary, so I think a lot of people who may have not made documentary before have been like, it's on the fly. Like, are these things, but they're so beautiful. Like, are these things planned? Did you go out knowing the shots you want?
Is this like specific to documentaries, or is it just like the visuals themselves that you're meaning?
The visuals, like the things that you capture, were these things in your head? Were these things that were on the fly that you got?
It actually depends on like if it's relating it to a documentary or client work. It doesn't matter. Like the visuals, they're always in support of something that you're trying to say or something that you're trying to show. So like from a like if you're just trying to make art or you're trying to make beautiful images, like Sam's spot on. Like if it, that's just something that you feel where you want to go and what you want to take, and it comes from you. And then yeah, the technical stuff over time, just from practice, it comes through and it starts to lift like what you can do with a camera.
Yeah.
I think in terms of whether or not it's planned in a documentary setting or a project setting, it's really I think there's some things that you plan. If you've got something really specific that you want to show or that you want to, maybe the story is kind of going around in your head and there's a theme or something important that you want to get across. And, one day you're on a walk or you're driving somewhere and you see something and you're like, whoa, like I know how I could capture that, which would help with the story that I'm writing. Sometimes it just comes to you and like, but it's usually in support of something. And like Sam and I have taken two different approaches. One where, we've gone and like, you've got like verite style documentary, which is where you just go and follow a character and just like observe what they're doing. And it's just real life and you're filming it. In those moments, you want to focus on what's happening and what's being said, but you want the images to be compelling, like to pull you in and to point to you know, like every frame points to something really specific and adds to the narrative. Like that's what you want it to do. And then I think from the technical and from the practice of making stuff pretty, that naturally ends up being a part of it too. And you look for things, you look for things that look beautiful, but you don't want it to detract from the storytelling element. And then yeah, the other approach that we've taken is where we've said, okay, we've filmed a lot of this verite stuff. We have the story, but now we want to add to it with something a lot more controlled because there's something specific that we want to highlight about a character's psychology or yeah, like maybe it's a troubling part of someone's life or a really happy part of someone's life. And when you were running and gunning, you couldn't quite get it. You just got the pieces that were there, but then you can come back and capture things in a much more controlled, maybe even storyboarded way. And that's been actually really fun doing that, like with Sam, because we've come out with some really, really lovely stuff by doing that. So yeah,
Do you guys storyboard for your documentaries?
Yeah, so I think I feel like my way was more like if I went out to shoot photographs for myself, that's what I'd do. And maybe if we went out to shoot surf, like we'd know the conditions, we'd know the locations, and we'd go there and we'd shoot and we'd maybe work with the light. But yeah, as Antoine was saying, we always had a rough idea, and maybe this idea didn't always stay constant, but we had a rough idea of the storyline of our documentary and where we thought it might go. Because like obviously we were working on a really long story that ended up changing all the way through. And I think that's something you got to kind of become okay with, the fact that you might pitch this documentary at the start and that it's going to change. And
Can you tell
still
us a little
change.
bit about what the documentary is? Because I
Yeah.
know, but the people out there don't. Can you tell us a little bit about the story?
Yeah, so we've been working on a documentary for past probably 2.5 to 3 years, with a young surfer from Scotland. And I met his name's Ben Lard. He's a big wave surfer, and yeah, I met him quite a while back. I think like 4 or 5 years ago now, and was shooting photography with him. Um, and just kind of being around him, I was like, this kid has an amazing character. He's very unique. I learned a little bit about his backstory. He had like a, I love that Ben is cool as heck in the comments. Yeah, he's a cool guy. He just had this great backstory, and just like quite a unique individual. He was like the cool surfer kid, but he came from this little island off the coast of Scotland with 600 people, and he had quite a tough upbringing. And he didn't have the past that you'd expect him to have, and that made quite a unique character. And we saw a lot of potential in him. We were like, this guy's like surfs amazing, like way better than anyone else in this country, and like he hadn't fully been discovered yet. And we were kind of like, we wanted to record the story of Ben as an underdog coming from such an unlikely location and country and not known for its surf. And we were really like, I think this guy could do well. Um, and yeah, that was the story originally. It was just going to be the story of an underdog surfer. It was going to be quite a short documentary, potentially. And yeah, that's what we were going to follow. And then one thing led to another, and Ben ended up getting signed on a professional contract, which was like the first ever Scottish surfer to be signed professionally. He got signed with Red Bull and then went on a professional contract with O'Neill, and like two big surf companies. And yeah, he started surfing out in Nazare in these insane waves, like the biggest waves in the world. And we were just like, whoa, this story is just like going and going. And then yeah, like I guess it's not really a ruiner, but is it a ruiner, Anton, if I tell the next bit?
No, I don't think so. That's the plot. So you can say it.
Okay. Yeah, the next bit. So basically, a few days after signing with Red Bull, everyone was really stoked. And we had some nice footage going up to this point. Obviously, didn't know that that was going to happen, with Red Bull. And then a few days after signing, he was out in the water surfing, just small waves. And a guy dropped in onto his wave and was surfing in front of him. And Ben pulled off and paddled back out. And the guy was a local guy, and he paddled over to Ben and started shouting at him. There's a thing in surfing like called localism, and where sometimes people are territorial over their waves because they're finite, so they can get annoyed. I'm not saying it's right. I don't agree with that at all. They can get territorial when people come to surf their location, and he paddled over to Ben and started shouting at him, and there was a bit of a confrontation. And Ben went to get out of the water, and he was assaulted, and the man punched him in the side of the head, burst his eardrum. And long story short, this basically led on to like, although it was a burst eardrum, it's not hugely severe. As a surfer, it's pretty severe and leads to a lot of like infections, balance problems. And it pretty much put Ben in this situation of like extreme uncomfort. He felt like he didn't really belong in the surfing world after that. He was really struggling with his like mental health and with his confidence. And basically the story follows Ben as he tries to kind of get back to the professional level of surfing that people expect him to be at. And he's constantly toying with this battle in his head of, is he actually good enough to be there, or is he like completely out of his depth? I feel like that's kind of where it was sitting. I don't know about you, Anton. Have you got anything to add to that?
No, no, that was great. That was great. So exploration of yeah, what happens next and psychologically, like what journey does he go on? That's where the focus is.
That's so
Yeah.
amazing. I think a lot of it, the story's so good, and the images that you got to support the story are also really, really beautiful. And the relationship you've built with him, I think that sounds like there's a lot of trust there. How do you do that? So I think the mystery is like, do you have sponsorship that helped you get to this far? Is this something that I know you have client work, which is what we're going to talk about soon. Do you have client work coming in so that you can do your passion projects? How does that work?
You know, Anton?
Yeah, it's a mix of things. I mean, the main thing, the recommended thing, is to like make sure that you've got a stream of income before you start, because it's, yeah, financing a documentary is it's challenging. It can be
Yeah.
really challenging, especially at the beginning when you're not established and you don't have a ton of contacts or relationships that can help you get your work in front of the right people. I mean, even knowing that that's something that you need to do, like, took a while, like, to get my head around when I worked on my first doc, like, um, I think, yeah, just client work is handy because it means that you can keep kind of practicing, cutting your teeth in like the storytelling aspect, but also working on your technical skills and all that. And they're nice, small, bite-sized projects that bring in money. Um, ideally you want to take it a step further and have clients where you've got regular work so that you can
Yeah.
like predict when you're going to be working and how much you're going to be making. That's easier said than done.
Yeah.
And yeah, and then I think if you're anything like Sam and I, you just want to go out and make stuff, and just tell the story that's in front of you. Especially in our case, it was like it was happening. So we either went and shot it or we missed out. So
Yeah.
we went and shot it. Um, and then it was like a crazy, crazy rush to raise as much money as we could. So the approach that we took was to reach out to brands and basically tell them, hey, we've got this really cool project. It's in line with sort of, your kind of world, your ethos, your mission, your mission statements and the sort of things you're involved with as a brand. So do you want to be a part of this? Do you want part of the equity that, we're creating here? And that was attractive to a number of brands who saw value in associating themselves with Ben, his success, his story, whatever happened. There's funding as well. There's grants. There's so many different approaches that you can take. But yeah, it's a good question because that's probably the most challenging part.
Yeah, agree. I think we went that private sponsorship route, as Antoine said, because we had to chase what was happening right in front of us. We felt like we couldn't leave this, or the story wouldn't be told, and we'd miss too many important parts. So we had to like go, and we started
Yeah.
filming before we even had funding in, which is a really funny thing. I've learned a lot over the years, and you come back to realize that that can actually have negative impact on your
Mm.
project further down the line in certain ways, because a lot of the other route that you could go is to bring your idea, especially if it's less time sensitive, have your idea and then go the more traditional documentary funding route where you could maybe go to Creative Scotland or other bodies like that, who are more interested usually in like development funding and starting funding from the start of the project rather than halfway through the filming of the project, because they
Yeah.
might like to have a say on the direction or the way that it goes. So yeah, you could, there's definitely the two routes, as Anton said. But yeah, we were talking before, Jessica, and I'd be completely honest with everyone. Like me and Anton, we were figuring this out as well, and it's super super hard. Like it's so hard, and sometimes, especially with brands, you just have to have a lot of confidence in yourself. Like you're pitching you're pitching something that's in your brain, and you have to try and make them realize that it's a really good story. So I think if you make a really strong pitch deck, and if you have like the gut feeling that your story is really good, you just need to stand by that, and you'll pitch to some people and they'll maybe not reply, or you pitch to some people and you'll have a call and they'll be like, man, they don't really get it. But
Yeah.
then if it gets 100 no's and a yes, you keep pitching to brands, keep going, you'll meet the right ones. If they're stoked on the story, you'd be surprised like what the stuff that they'll do to make it happen.
I think that's so important. Antoine, Sam, thank you so much because I'm trying to put my feet in the shoes of those who are applying soon. And I know that a lot of the money is going towards development. So they're able to kind of develop an idea, have a sense of where it's going to market, try to find innovative routes. So could I ask, if someone gave you a chunk of money to develop an idea, would you lean into what first is like your passion and your story and then worry about the audience later? Do you start thinking, now that you know what you know, do you start thinking about your contacts and your network and maybe the audience for it? Where, when you're developing an idea, do you begin? And Sam, you mentioned like how important it is to get the ideas in your head out on paper that you can share. So in addition to that, like what are some of the tools that you've used that are really effective, like pitch packages, sizzle reel, something along those lines that you think works?
Yeah. I think like to get your idea down on paper, I think we use something called Miro, which is really good, and it allows us to like work from different locations, and you can use like sticky notes and different things to create a storyboard. Um, and that's a really good way to get your story outline put down, and that gives you a good idea of like where you want to go and how you want to take it. And then I guess from there, it depends on the length of the project and it depends on the style of the project. The ski project I was looking at with Axel, it's a lot easier. It was a lot easier for us to plan and predict how long it was going to take and how much money it would take. So once you've got your story and your plan, you can then start to create a budget. If you have a really good idea of your story and your characters and your locations, you can start to create a budget. And then from there, you can start to look at what funding bodies are going to be the best option. And again, we were up against time with the other one, and I'm not sure if that doc's going to go ahead or not. But we started to look at like, okay, so if this has to be started filming by this point, who could we get in? Does it have to go the private route? Does it have to go the documentary grant like funding route? Do we have enough time for that? And kind of split it that way. That makes sense. I don't know if you have something to add to that, Anton. I don't know if I've explained that very well.
You
Yeah,
did.
I mean, what I would add to that is, I just jotted some notes down there. I didn't want to lose track of it. I think you want to make sure, obviously, like you want to have a really strong character because like a documentary starts with a really strong character that has like a clear goal or something that they want, or an answer, like a question that they want answered or something. And obviously, there's got to be obstacles. There's got to be things in the way. That's the story part. If you're confident that you're onto something and that you've got like a really good story and a really good like structure, uh, having gone this far now working on these projects, uh, I'm tempted to say, yeah, think about once you've got that, the next question is there an audience for this? Just because if you're going to say, hey, this is for everybody, like I've made this story and I want everybody to watch it because I want it to be successful. It doesn't really work like that. It's kind of like putting a product or a service as a company like to the market. You've got to first find out, is there space for this? Is there a demand for this? Is this something people are interested in? And the challenging thing here as well is that there might be a bunch of people that you know that are interested in it, and you might know there's thousands of people that are interested in it, but the people who get your project in front of an audience, unless you do it like all yourself and just try and figure out how you're going to do that all yourself, they're treating like they're looking at the market based on just demand and some indicators that they've got, some stats and figures of like whether or not they think this is going to perform for them as a distributor. So those things are really important to think about and to go and find out, because filmmaking, it's hard and it takes a lot out of you, a lot of time. You're going out and asking people for money, and they're going out on a limb and they're trusting you, and there's all these relationships that you're building along the way. You want to make sure that there's an avenue there that's going to work and that's not going to fall flat on its face, or you're going to be tired and frustrated, and it takes a lot out of you. So it's important to ask those sorts of questions, like to really think about that.
That's so important. I think that's really important because filmmaking, essentially, you're right, is about building relationships and having that trust both with the subject or character and also the people who are investing in it, and actually having that route toward like a clear idea of how you get it seen or out into the world. Even if it doesn't come to fruition, at least you know where you're headed. Is that the same, can I ask, in terms of structure? So when you're creating a documentary, do you know exactly at the end, you're like, okay, the sponsors or the people want X? Because I know we've talked about like episodes versus feature. How flexible is structure when you go to start a documentary?
Um, well, what we're finding out is that the structure can, in fact, be flexible. Um, it depends. It depends. Like, I think if you've got, like, I think we started out with a specific story in mind that we wrote that had a beginning, middle, and end. And well, I say we wrote as we were filming. We were writing it, as in we were figuring out how the pieces of Ben's story were going to fit together into a nice, neat structure. And once we'd shot everything, it was time to go and consolidate all that, figure out exactly how this thing would run. And we figured we had roughly instead of it being these 15-minute episodes, like for a mini doc series that we pitched, we realized, oh, we've got probably 30-minute episodes, like 30-minute episodes. And now that we're in the edit process, we're realizing that there's this is a conversation Jessica and I were having just before, like, um, you've got like a feature length version of this film, an hour and a half, that can run a certain way because you've got your beginning, middle, and end, and it's cut into these acts, and you're figuring out how's that going to flow, and how am I going to hook my audience, and then how's the story going to carry through. But then when you've got episodes, you then have to think, okay, people are going to be watching these staggered out. We don't know how long it's going to be between, them seeing one episode or the other. So there's things that you've got to like remind the audience of, show again, and actually it ends up, we're finding out the hard way right now that sometimes, yeah, you need to restructure things quite aggressively so that as an episode, it's strong, and then if you want, like what we're trying to do is also figure out a way that we can have the feature length, which would be structured differently again so that it would flow as a feature.
So you could have like multiple versions. I just want to make sure that people like, so you can have multiple versions of the same story through different formats.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to keep those options open to yourself, at least in the distribution, like negotiation process, and as you're approaching people. I mean, even before then, you want to think like, how could this work in the market? Like, what could the demand be? Is am I going to have more chances of this functioning in the like 30-minute episodes or 25-minute episodes so that it can go on TV? Because there's certain requirements for, I don't know if everybody knows, but there's, depending on where you distribute, we've learned there are different requirements in terms of runtime so that they can put ad breaks and stuff. So now you're going, okay, what kind of return can we make on this so that, and how, if we're gonna, is it going to be worth taking the time to restructure the whole thing so that we can get it to like live television? Is that worth it? Or do we want to go through, are we going to just focus on having a feature length that we'll release at the cinema? Do we want to just do it our way and screw everybody and we'll release it ourselves and it's just a piece of art at the end of the day? They're good questions to ask, and it's going to be different for every project.
Yeah. I really understand that. And I think that's like really valuable for people to hear, especially when they're beginning to develop a project and are linked into a story and care about it and are trying to figure out maybe what the avenue is for distribution, whether YouTube or even things that feel that easy. They're not always easy. Trying to figure out kind of the different structures of the story that you're telling, knowing that you can be flexible about them, creating different versions, I think is really helpful to hear. Can I ask, before we move on from the documentary and start talking about client work and clients, is there any lessons learned that we haven't mentioned that you think are really worth mentioning, things that you learned along the way?
um, hard to know where to start.
One
I'm
thing I
not
was
sure.
thinking about was the trailer.
The
Actually,
trailer.
yeah, the feedback on your trailer I thought was so interesting about how many mysteries people can really sit with.
I think that would probably be the biggest thing that I've taken away is like don't be worried to like look elsewhere for help, to like look for there's always going to be someone that's more experienced than you or has a different view than you, or like you get them to watch it and they're going to give you feedback, and it's like it's up to you whether you definitely take it the way that they've recommended or not. And it's totally down to your gut feeling as like a filmmaker. But I think like where we've been quite bad for like battling on, and then sometimes you're in a position where you're really stuck and you're like, oh, I don't know what to do. And then I think I have luck, like we've ended up meeting people that would help us. But I definitely recommend looking for people that could help you. And once you've got a good idea of your story, you've maybe got your deck together and you know where you want to take it roughly, I'd recommend looking for people to help you who can give you guidance and give you advice and support. And also like you'll find even working on a really short piece, like even if it's like a 1 minute piece, when you're editing that thing, you get so stuck into the edit that you sometimes just assume either people will understand that or you have a tunnel vision on the way it's going to go. And then like if you came back to that like 3 weeks later without looking at it, you'd look at it and want to make changes. But it's really valuable, like time wise, to get other people's opinions on it and be open to their opinion because they can sometimes see it for a different reason. And what Jessica's was pointing at was we made a trailer for our documentary, and we wanted it to be clear to the audience in that trailer that something had happened to Ben, something that was potentially going to end his career, and that he would have to recover from. But we decided that we were like, oh, we could make it a cliffhanger so that people watch it and understand and want to know what was it that happened to Ben. But then when we got feedback on that from a few people, they were like, oh, it's weird. I watched that and I wasn't really sure what happened at that bit. And what happened was instead of their concentration being on the story and how the story was unfolding, and the important part of the story was his rise back to being a surfer, they'd got stuck on this little bit that was like they weren't sure what was happening in that scene. And we were so in the documentary and so in making it that we were making assumptions in our head that people knew the story, if that makes sense. So yeah, I think like reach out to people for help and be open to feedback and to making changes. And like don't take it like personally, I think. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, I yeah agree with all that for sure. I think there's two really major things that I would want, like I want to get across to anybody that's like trying to do this. Um, like aside from, yeah, like find out, get help, um, like figure out, find out the information that you need about the process of filmmaking, especially like the producing and distribution side. Like there's so many things like to know and to find out, and it doesn't hurt just to go dig in and find out what kind of hurdles you'll come up against. And I say that because the filmmaking part is, it can be pretty tiring on its own, like just the
Mhm.
production and the writing and the thinking about the story, and like the amount of time that that takes is pretty huge, especially when you're really passionate about something. And so like the first lesson that I would want to impart is that you just make sure you take care of your body, of your mind, that you rest. I learned recently that resting is actually part of the work. It's actually an important part of the process, is just taking care of yourself, to avoid burnout and just like basically being so ambitious that you forget to look after your like more basic needs, which sounds simple, but when you're really deep in a project that you care about and you're like, oh, just one more step and I'll get there, you can really exhaust yourself. So that's number one. And the other thing is, um, there's a cool study that I heard about people making, I don't know if you've heard it, but people making 30 pots versus one pot. And I loved that. It hit home so hard. It was like, I'm not going to do this justice, but there were a bunch of students that were given the task of, they were split into two teams, and they were given the task of, like one group was, okay, make the most beautiful pot you possibly can. And like you've got until whatever the time period was to like make the most amazing pot. And then the other group, they were like, you can, just make, I think it was like just make 30 pots. And I'm pretty sure they weren't even asked to make them beautiful. They just said just make 30 pots. And it was like something like 90, I don't know what percent of the participants that made the 30 pots actually made substantially better looking pots than the people who made the one perfect one. And this hit home for me because I had this idea of like creating a portfolio early on in my career that was going to help me get work, and that was going to establish myself as a director, a cinematographer, all these ambitions that I had. And each of those projects, because I cared about them, I let them kind of grow and grow and grow to like to a size, to the point where I like they're still not done. And I don't think that it's a bad route to take. If you've got a project that's growing and growing and you care about it and you want to tell that story, go for it. I'm just saying, I suppose my recommendation would be start on smaller pieces, so that you can get like understand like all the things that go into it, because so much goes into making a film. And then have the satisfaction of having it done, and okay, cool, what did I learn from that, and then take that to the next one. And that learning you'll get better, and you'll learn a lot, like from what I understand, a lot faster than if you work on just one grueling project and then 2, 3 years down the line, it's still not done and people still don't know what you can do and it can be exhausting. So yeah, just keep that in mind.
And I love that. That was one of my favorite stories too, actually. It's absolutely brilliant. I think I read that in the book like Fear and Art or Art and Fear. It's a really, really good like book about the psychology of making stuff. And my mom's an art teacher, so I always really liked showing that to her. And be like, I think the guy literally weighed the amount of clay they used by like the end of the year and like graded the ones who were just supposed to make 30 pots on that. Like how many could you fit in? And yeah, we get sometimes so stuck in our head that we have to have the perfect idea or the perfect outcome that like totally forget that regardless of where you are in your career, it's a learning process. Like there was a time when I was younger where I knew exactly what movie I was going to make after what movie, and it was going to be this like perfect list of like this would be my work. I'm like, that's gone out the window. I'm just like making as much as I can. So I think that's a really, really important lesson. So there's like passion projects and trying to make them a reality and working with sponsors and following the story and putting all that work and grit. And thank you too for saying this idea about rest, how important it is. And that's so true too. It is part of the process. It's not like a break from the process. Um, is working with clients different? When you guys have a client and they want a video or what's that relationship like? And are there any similarities?
I think there's some similarities, especially in the way that we've done our documentary, because we're obviously working with sponsors who are now technically clients. You know, they have deliverables, they have certain things that they want delivered. But I think when you're working with a client, like obviously it depends on the job. I feel like it's a lot more structured. I feel like sometimes it's almost more rewarding, like because you're getting that reward straight away, and I think it's really really good practice as well for working on longer projects. So, like for example, I feel like our dream jobs are working on mini docs for clients because it's like you get to work on that documentary. The client has an idea of a story. They usually give you some creative direction. It's very structured. You have a budget, and then you can produce a short documentary quickly. And yeah, I really enjoy that.
Yeah.
Um, so I think with the client work, it's like you go in, you discuss with the client what they want, and you create them a pitch and a story, and you agree on that, you agree on the final budget, and then you have very structured shoot days, and you have a storyboard that you'll have written out to complete that story in X amount of time. And I'm speaking this now and I'm like, that's what you should have for your documentary, but it just doesn't work out that way for documentaries all the time because there's so much twists and turns, of your story and where it goes. But yeah, that's the way we usually structure client work on like a documentary basis.
Amazing. And do these clients find you? Do you find them? Do you like come to them and been like, hey, you really need a video? Or how does that happen?
No, I think we're very lucky. As Antoine said, we've worked on this huge project, and um, through that we've met a lot of people. We've also become quite confident in pitching ideas to people. So and networking, like once you start to network and you start to meet people in person, it's almost way easier than cold pitching. Like
Yeah.
what I've started to find is that the majority of the work that I'm getting is not through cold pitches. It's through like I don't know, I went on the shoot and I came up and I met this person and I
Oh,
chatted with
wow.
them, got along with them, and they were like, oh, do you know what? I like this guy. Then I don't know, you message on Instagram here and there to catch up, and then they have something for you. And I think you end up getting messages through social media and through email that way because of like keeping relationships going and being yourself and being friendly with people. I think that helps. And then there's also the flip side of that where you can cold pitch to people, but again, that's easier if you have an in. It's like less of a cold pitch. Maybe you've spoken to them before and they've said like, "Oh, we're struggling with this side of our company," or like, "Oh yeah, we'd love to have you on as to do some social media for our company," and then you've looked at their page and you said like, "Right, okay, this is what they're missing from their social media. They could maybe do with this aspect," and then you can come up with that idea and you can maybe soft pitch it to them through an email or a call if you know them well. And
Mhm.
then if they like the idea, then you can go and develop it. Or you could go with a full pitch deck and pitch to them. But I'm always a little bit wary of that because it takes a lot of time. And don't always have the time to create a full pitch deck to then get a no, if that makes sense.
That totally makes sense. And then maybe in your conversation with them, you're kind of hearing what they're really trying to say, which might affect the idea that you take to them. So that makes sense that you do some exploration first.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's definitely something like you need to learn, especially when you're so ambitious about your idea. Sometimes you're trying to tell, like, you go into a client and you pitch to them and they go, "Oh, that's a nice idea. I really like it," but it's not actually what they need to grow as a company. And then
Yeah,
you have to listen to what they actually need and maybe restructure your idea or scrap your idea and do what they need. Because at the end of the day, like with clients, it's like you're there to make their business grow or help them. So you kind of have to structure what you're doing to what they need. So.
absolutely. Is it always straightforward? Like I know the development of a documentary sometimes isn't, but with a client, do you like for folks who don't like, do you pitch a price point and say like, hey, for my services, this is it? Do you let them say this is what our budget is? And you're like, no, cool, I can do this for your budget. Is it quite clear and straightforward how to work with clients?
I don't know if it's like it's not clear and straightforward. I think it's a lot of a confidence thing as well. It's a huge confidence thing. I think the best way is to for them to say this is what we need and you go, okay, that's great. Like I think we could do it this way. What is your budget?
Okay.
Because I don't know, it's kind of like how long's a piece of string? Like how many people do you bring onto the project? What quality do you make it? Like do you shoot
Yeah.
it yourself? Do you have a full team? And I think that's pretty key. Um, Quite often what happens is you say, "What's your budget?" And they say, "I don't know, how much does it cost?" And then it's a bit of that weird thing. And
Back and forth.
from
Yeah.
there you could go, you could look at your day rates and figure it out roughly and say like, "This is the package we could offer you for that." But I think with the best clients, you want a budget that you can work to. Um, I don't know, Antoine, if you've got anything to add to that.
Yeah, I mean, that's a big one. Every client is different. Actually, I think what we're finding is that more and more, if a client is saying, "Hey, I actually don't know what my budget is, how much is this going to cost?" It's usually a bit of a flag. Like, at least to me, it's like this is a red flag. It's like, okay, well, if you don't know how much this is going to cost, then maybe this is like a signal of like your understanding of your own marketing budget and
Yeah.
what you can and can't do. And so inevitably with those clients, at least in our experience, you just run into problems and you end up like having to do a lot more because the budget ends up being like really restrictive. And you want to be careful that you're not saying yes to stuff that actually is going to inhibit like what you know you can do and the quality that you want to represent yourself as, like we're a production company that does work that looks and sounds and feels like this. And if your budget doesn't allow for us to hit the baseline of that, then
Yeah.
maybe it's not worth our time. But it's a difficult one, especially when you're starting out. I don't know what, where everybody's at, but you do also at the beginning have to just kind of take on jobs and just like start getting involved with clients and trying to find ways to get paid for what you're doing. And because that's also learning, like having to deal with those clients, even the really terrible ones, it's part of the learning process, of how to manage that and how
Yeah.
to value yourself. And yeah, it's a learning curve for sure.
Well, guys,
Yeah.
I really appreciate your candor and your honesty. Yes, Sam.
Oh, sorry. And one thing I'd add to that is like you've got to be like proactive and keep things moving at a reasonable pace because sometimes like the client may go elsewhere, but also don't like rush into things. I think
Mm.
like if you're on that call and they're asking you questions and they're asking for a budget, it's totally okay to say, right, this all sounds great. Let me go away and have a think about this and we can have a chat about it later. Because
Cool.
I think quite often like you sometimes feel like you maybe want to like, and it's something you fall into all the time, like not just when you're starting out, maybe with like a new client or it's like a dream brand you've always wanted to work with. And it's very easy to fall into that excitement of just being like, yeah, I can do it for that. That's grand. Or like, or you want to just say yes because you feel like you might lose the job. But if you can say like, that's great, I really want to do this job. Let me go away and look at this budget and figure it out. It just gives you a little bit of breathing room to look at it and then decide like, is this actually the right job for me? And I've often found as well, like, I don't know if like folk have heard of like the power of saying no is
Yeah.
like sometimes if you go back to a client and you really politely say to them like, I'd really love to do this project, but unfortunately I won't be able to do it to the standard that I want to on that budget. I'd love to work with you in future. sometimes people come back to you in future, they're like, oh yeah, we agree, maybe this isn't right. Or you even get people who are like, do you know what? Yeah, I feel like I was offering you too low, and then they come
Wow.
back in future and they offer you something else. And I think that's like it can be really beneficial to say no, but always everyone wants money and everyone wants money, so it's just finding that balance.
I think it is a good balance because you're saying there's like a certain amount of integrity that you have about your own work and you know what you can do for a certain amount. And sometimes you need to say, like, that's a boundary. I can't do it for that, but thank you. And it leads to some better things. My one of my mentors say you never say no to a job until you're 30, and that was a terrible idea. So I think that saying no sometimes can be really, really powerful. I have so many more questions, but I know other people might as well. So for folks who would like to ask questions, I wanted to open up to the group. You can put some thoughts in the chat box, which I know you've been doing anyway. Hi, John. Nice to see you. Um, but yeah, please, please either put yourself unmute and ask a question or write it in the chat box. Jump on in. I'll give people a moment to think. And if no one has any questions they'd like to ask, I also have more. So maybe I'll ask one more while people are thinking. Okay. Um, can you guys mention some, you've mentioned some, but other tools that you use that you think are essential? We kind of said pitch deck as if everyone might know what that is and what that entails. And I know there's all different kinds of varieties of pitch decks. Yeah, tell us some about the tools that you kind of can't live without.
Yeah, well, if I mean, pitch decks are really important for documentaries for sure. The reason being, you just need something that you can show to potential funders that kind of makes clear like where you're coming from with the project idea, like what the story is or what the characters are, like what it is that you're trying to build, to try and hook them. Because at the beginning it's an idea, so you're trying to communicate the idea, but also give some kind of substance that can give you some credibility, especially if you've never worked with the person you're approaching before. And so like the key word here is presentation. So it's really making sure that okay, I don't have a trailer yet, or I don't have a pilot or whatever, or, the preview of this, like this thing that I've got in my head. I'm going to do my best to get a representation of that as polished as possible on a document that lays out all of the key things. And also, and it's an opportunity as well to show the funder or brand or whoever it is that you're thinking along the lines that they're thinking, so that they can understand, like, right, okay, you get it, you get where what we're after and what we need, and you're approaching us with a pitch that's tailored to like our goals and our mission, and that is like hugely valuable. And that goes for documentaries or just pitching commercial work. Like sometimes you've got an idea for a brand or something, and it could be a warm reach out, which helps a lot, or it could be cold and you don't know them. Again, that's where the pitch deck comes in, and it's like, hey, I mean, like Sam said, you don't want to spend tons of time just writing pitches like all day, because for all you know, that brand like doesn't care. Or they don't have any money, or they're busy doing other stuff and they can't. So it might be that you've reached out a few times. There's like a whiff of interest. So down the line, when you've got some time, you go, right, I'm going to put this pitch deck together, and that might get you over the line. So
Yeah.
it's a really useful tool for sure.
Yeah, and for pitch decks, like there's loads of like different softwares you can make them in. We've been using InDesign mainly. I just like love how customizable it is. And
Yeah.
once you have like one pitch deck, it's quite easy to then go and make more from the same one. Just use it as a base. But it's probably takes a little bit more time. You could use things like free software like Canva. You can even put pitch decks together really quickly. And the
That's
good thing about Canva is like you can all share it online. So if you're working in a team, you can have a call and say like, oh, I like this bit. I think this bit needs changed. And that's kind of what we've been doing on the other ski documentary we were working on. I was kind of a little bit more hands-off approach, and I could jump on a call with the guys and say like, oh, you're missing this or you need this. And Axel as well, that was just on the call, was doing the same thing. So
yeah.
Canva was a really good one for it. I don't really like how it looks as visually, but like it's a good one to get a quicker pitch deck together.
Have you ever used AI to help with the pitch deck?
that was my next thing. It was like on the edge. I was like, oh, AI. It's
Oh,
like,
wow, yeah, cool.
yeah, not just for pitch decks, but generally. But yeah, like I was just saying, I was like, I'm sure that I mean I've seen platforms that use AI to help generate templates. I've already seen that. My guess is it's getting like a lot better. We've because of the time at which AI has like come onto the scene, as intensely as it now is, like we haven't had to use it or haven't really used it much for the pitching process yet. But the stuff I'm seeing online on a daily basis is insane. And like, yeah, that would be the next thing I'd say is like there are kinds of platforms like I wanted to mention like Milanote and Miro. Miro is spelled Miro, by the way. Those are super cool because they're like whiteboards. So you can just chuck on visuals, sounds, text, and just everything that's in your head in one place, which is really, really nice to not have to click on a bunch of different programs to open different things up. It's really handy. And we lean on it a lot for our film and as a business. But also, yeah, just AI tools like it's like as scary as it is right now with what AI may or may not do to the industry, I think just it's worth leaning in because like I mean the other day I was Sam, I haven't told you this, but the other day I was editing some deliverables for a client and it needed to be done pretty quickly. And I chopped it all together, cut it, and like got the edit the way that I liked it. And then I thought, oh god, I still got to do the sound effects. Well, I found out there's a tool that's amazing that you can use where you say, hey, like you know I just need sound to the image that I've cut together and you can just run it through this program and it's not amazing yet but it's getting there and you can just tell it like this is what I don't want so don't generate music don't generate speech or anything. I just need sound effects to match the picture and the sound effects need to be waves breaking, trees rustling, whatever, and the AI then figures out
Oh my
where it
gosh.
needs to go. It's fairly rudimentary still, and it needs coaching. And I would say for anything more major, like client work or like a film release or something, I don't think it's at a stage yet where you would want to solely be relying on that. You'd still want it to be at a certain standard, but the tech is getting there, and it's like these tools are invaluable and like you can shy away from them and get mad at them but also like they're gonna what I'm realizing is it's allowing the quality of your work to skyrocket if you look out for it and you find the tools, and it can be really beneficial.
Yeah, I think one other one is just like ChatGPT. It's like the classic, like when people think of AI, it's just like the classic go-to. And like Antoine's been doing a lot of the kind of like the filming and the editing and like that more creative side. And I've been doing a lot of like producing and writing and for decks and for applications. And one thing I found was like we were on like a super tight timeline to get something in for pitching application. And I end up using ChatGPT quite a lot because sometimes it'll be like I think it's really good to write your synopsis of your film and your story and stuff yourself and really put time into it because it helps you learn it. But
Mm.
once you've got that, you'll quite often have like a entry and it's like write your synopsis in 250 characters and you're like, oh god, and that could take you half a day or it could take you all day depending who you are to get it right and to get it to feel right. If you just take your synopsis, put it in Chat GPT, say, can you write me this in 250 characters and give it a good code of what you actually specifically want it to do, it'll boom, it'll just cut it down and it's not going to be perfect, but you can regenerate it a few times and take like three different types and then merge them together, or you can take the first one and edit it again. Like I wouldn't just chat GPT everything because that's like stupid. It'll take all the soul out of your work, but it's so valuable. And even when you're really tired, like chat GPT and email and just get it to correct it in case it's stupid and you've done something wrong. Like I'm dyslexic and I use that quite a lot. It's useful. And then yeah, I think that's like a super useful tool just to use. And often things as well, like I don't know, maybe you have to do like a director's like statement or biography. You could say like you could write your director statement and then you could say like, could you please restructure this and improve this, referencing other director statements from IMDb and reliable sources, and it will restructure it in an industry standard way so you come across professional and you can instead of just taking that you can look at it and then look at IMDb and study it and understand why it might be like that. But I think it's a super useful thing as well.
Sam,
And
that's
it's free.
so helpful. You know, I have a friend who was pitching her company to like a group of investors, and she's like, "Can you please like redo this pitch in the tone of and like one of her heroes. And it's like in the way they write. So it is, or even like practice pitching as like back and forth. But that's really, really good advice. Um, really quickly, because I know some people are leaving, my last question for you is, and I know we're a little over time, but we started a bit late. Every single project I'm starting now seems to have a website and its own social media handle, like every movie, every TV show we're developing. And it's a really exhausting managing all of this. Like, even if you're sitting on it, do you guys prescribe to that? Do you feel like every project needs a presence on social media, needs its own website? How do you do that?
I don't know. I think there's kind of pros and cons of both, to be honest. I think like client work obviously doesn't need it. Like I think it's really good to get the rights to put that on your own socials to show who you're working with, and also keeps you a stream of work if you're working on a lot of client work. And but with our documentary, we decided that we're actually going to put it out through our production company page, and also through the athlete's page. He's part of the
Okay.
documentary. So that's what we decided to do. And whether we make a website further down the line, I'm not sure. But yeah, I think one thing that I wish we did a little bit more was put out more content to create a following behind this. But I think we're lucky enough that we have fans following there as well, so it's a good start.
Including
Um,
me.
but yeah,
That's awesome. Guys, thank you so much. I cannot thank you enough for like the information you shared, the stories, the candor, and just spending your time with us. I think this was so helpful to so many people. And it's also going to be available live online through Highlands and Islands Enterprise. I cannot wait to see what happens with your documentary.
thank you. Cheers for
Thanks.
having us on.
Cheers. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.